Support for the CivicSciTV network comes from readers, listeners, and viewers like you, and organizations such as the New York City Economic Development Corporation that works with local communities to create dynamic and accessible neighborhoods across New York City. Explore the network by visiting CivicSciTV.org.
Mapping the global landscape of civic science by dissecting new insights from researchers, practitioners, and leaders in academia, government, for-profit, and nonprofit organizations. This is Questions of the Day with Fanuel Muindi.
Previously on Questions of the Day.
Societal needs, because of the interests of young people, going into science, they're demanding this as well, right? We're seeing that, that demand through our microgrant program and the new public engagement content program that the Lasker Foundation and now the Dana Foundation is helping us to support, where we put out a call for non-tenured faculty and grad students to develop content to help train their peers to engage in civic science.
Today, we speak with Aubrey Streit Krug, the director of the Perennial Cultures Lab at the Land Institute, which is a science-based research organization based in Kansas that's dedicated to developing alternatives to destructive, and this is what they say, destructive agricultural practices. So in my conversation with Aubrey, she describes how the Institute's Perennial Atlas project leverages civic science to transform agricultural research by engaging everyday citizens. So these are backyard gardeners to even professional farmers. The project gathers standardized data and observations on perennial grain crops. And Aubrey explains that this innovative approach not only enriches scientific insights, but also builds partnerships. And you'll hear a lot of this partnership development to empower communities and pave the way for a more sustainable future. This was a fun conversation, and I look forward to having Aubrey back on the program, so stay tuned for that. Of course, don't forget to subscribe to stay tuned with what's going on across the network. Enjoy the conversation.
Aubrey Streit Krug, thank you so much for joining me today.
I'm so happy to be here.
So when you're telling people about the Land Institute, what do you tell them?
I tell them that the Land Institute is an agricultural research nonprofit organization. And what we're doing is creating perennial versions of grain crops to be grown in more diverse cropping systems that can nourish people and feed human communities these amazing staple foods of grains, and that can have deeper, long-living, lasting root systems that can hold soil, filter water, and provide all kinds of ecological benefits in comparison to our current annual grain crops. So creating new options that are more sustainable ways to feed ourselves.
And who do you find yourself describing what the Land Institute does to normally? Like who's coming to you asking what is this thing that you have organized?
So the Land Institute works with a lot of different research partners, people who are scientists working on crop development, ecological research, but we also work with community partners, farmers who might be interested in growing these future perennial grain crops, and increasingly civic scientists who are interested in partnering with us on participating in the research that we do.
Okay, so you mentioned the keyword there, civic scientists. In fact, you have a whole civic science, I want to say program. Is it a program? How about you tell us what it is actually?
Yeah, so we use civic science as a kind of way to name the citizen science participatory research method that we practice. So when we're thinking about how to domesticate these novel perennial grain crops, we're thinking about how people can participate in that process with us. And when people grow these seeds and seedlings out in their backyards or community gardens or on a little plot on their farm, and they study and collect the data on how these plants are doing, and they share back that scientific data along with their stories and experiences. Um, and we get to learn together along with the sort of broader communities and their places. We sort of name this as using the civic science method. And it's a really exciting research education effort. And then within this kind of civic science program, we have several different active civic science projects with different plants and people.
Okay, so we gotta break this thing down because there's a lot you said in there, right?
Yeah.
They are the public really that are coming to do this work, right? They sign up. I saw there's a sign up sheet online, right? And I think in the year 2023, you had about 95 of them spread across the United States. So let's just go to the beginning. So how does this work? Someone signs up, right? And they are just tell us about that. They're signing up to do what exactly?
Yeah. So we have even more civic scientists now, as we're talking at the start of 2025. The program has grown with our different projects. And we have, as you mentioned, an interest form on our website where people can sign up, enter their kind of interest in participating in this research. And then when we have a project that's a good fit based upon where they are and what they're interested in, then we gather that group together. I'll give the example using our current active biggest project, which is called Perennial Atlas. So in this project, people who signed up, we sent them different seeds and seedlings of several future perennial grain crops, along with their annual counterparts. Those people set up a research plot in their backyard or in their area, according to the instructions we provided. We provide a lot of educational materials, and then they sign up on our digital platform. We partner with citsci.org, which is based out of Colorado State University. And there they have a lot more educational resources and data sheets, and people throughout the course of the growing season monitor those plants. They take pictures, they send us stories, they ask questions, they engage in the forums and share knowledge with each other, join community calls. At the end of the season, they harvest all the seeds from their plants and mail those back to us for us to analyze and look at the results of how these plants are doing in places all across the U.S. So the Land Institute's based in Kansas, and having a lot of different small research plots around the U.S. is really valuable for us to see how these plants do in a lot of different spots.
And the whole idea is this democratization of this process, right? More broadly. So do you provide training for these civic scientists?
Yeah, we support civic scientists in a variety of different ways. I'll hold up. We create a field guide with a whole bunch of information about who are these plants that you're getting to know and work with. Where did they come from? Why are we interested in creating perennial grain crops? How does this process work? But then we also provide some really practical one-on-one support, community calls, webinars, things like that, to be able to help civic scientists do data collection. There's a lot of instructions about what to collect, how to do that. We send out materials, different instruments, things like that people can use, and we try to support them throughout the project. And an interesting aspect of this agricultural hands-on civic science work is that because we're studying perennials, we're looking at plants that live for multiple years. That's the benefit of what we're trying to do here. But that means that it's really valuable for our civic scientists to participate for multiple growing seasons. So it's a big ask for people to join a project, not just one time to collect data and send it in and that's that, but to monitor and steward and care for a research plot for several years in a row. We really are grateful for all the observations that civic scientists share back with us and with each other.
So what is the typical length of engagement for a civic scientist?
This current project of Perennial Atlas, we hope to compile a set of maps about how these plants are doing in all these different places to make the atlas, and it's designed to be a 3-year project. So we have some other civic science projects that have gone a little bit longer, but in that 3-year range, we find is really valuable. And we hope with Perennial Atlas to be able to see the kind of persistence that civic scientists have for this long of a project.
Because even in itself, you are studying yourselves almost, right? The typical length they stick around. And I'm curious, do you collect data on who these civic scientists are? I mean, you have a map on your website, right, showcasing at least from the year 2023 where they're based. Do you collect any other types of information? Just give us some insight on who these people are.
Yeah. So we started our very first civic science pilot project back in 2019 and have had a couple of different project iterations leading up to this current largest perennial atlas project that we have. So over that time, we've learned a lot from civic scientists, not only about where they are, but the types of things they're interested in and what their motivations and backgrounds are. And so broadly speaking, we've noticed that perennial grain civic scientists tend to be people who have some kind of interest in agriculture or gardening, not surprising. Sometimes they're farmers, sometimes they're backyard gardeners, sometimes they're people who are just really interested in plants and saw this as a chance to get to know them in a deeper way. They also tend to be people who have backgrounds in education. Their ages span, across the spectrum, and we have people from around the U.S. So lots of different motivations, but people talk about wanting to contribute to research, to have those kind of hands-on sensory experiences, and to be able to, they might have heard about the idea of a perennial grain crop, but to be able to see how that grain crop actually might look in their place, not just on a screen, but in their backyard, and to kind of get to know it firsthand, that's been something that they report as motivating.
Yeah. Which perennial grain crop in particular for this newest project that you guys focused on?
Yeah, for this particular perennial atlas project, we're looking at 3 kind of perennial grain crops that are in development. One is silphium, which we're developing as a perennial oil seed, sort of like a perennial sunflower. Another one is sainfoin, which we're developing as a perennial legume. So you think about lentil or chickpea, perennial version of that. And then the third one is flax, perennial flax, which could also be an oilseed crop. So some really beautiful, very pollinator-friendly crops here, along with their annual counterparts. So there's lots of good observations to make about pollinators as well as pests and diseases in soil.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier this is going to be your biggest year, I believe, right? Or you've grown since
The biggest project, yeah.
the biggest project. So
Yeah.
how many civic scientists do you have at the moment?
So at the end of through our 2024 growing season, we had about 190 active civic scientists. So the 25 season will kick off later this spring when those perennial plants that are living below ground now reemerge above ground. So we'll see how everyone did throughout the winter and who emerges, but that's about the size of the group right now.
Yeah. So I want to take a quick pause here, Aubrey, and I'm just curious, how did you get into this work?
Yeah, it was an interesting story. My background is in the humanities, as well as place-based research. So my PhD is in English and Great Plains Studies, and I have a research interest in ethnobotany, how people and plants build relationships with each other, and in cultural studies. So I'm the director of the Perennial Cultures Lab at the Land Institute, and it's part of our work in growing these more transdisciplinary research projects. I started to collaborate with one of our plant breeders who was interested in growing the plants he was working with in a lot of different locations. And meanwhile, I was looking for ways to support people who wanted to have more hands-on experiences with these plants, and also to learn more about the stories of relationship that people were forming with future crops. Because for a crop to become a crop, it not only needs to have important plant characteristics, if you think about high yield or drought tolerance or things like that, but also a crop needs to be valued by people. People need to care about it and be aware of it. So we were inspired by another colleague of ours to sort of build this approach, learn about this amazing tradition of citizen science research. A lot of hands-on research happens in agricultural extension, and started piloting and testing this method.
Wow. It's amazing. I think talking about these stories, these personal stories to how you get involved in this work, I think are very important. What would you say is the biggest lesson that the civic scientists have taught you or the program thus far? What comes to mind as this is the thing that is kind of the foundation of the civic science work we're doing?
It's a tough question because there are so many fascinating lessons about how people relate to place and about how they tell these stories of getting to know these plants and the joy that they have in those experiences. But one thing that I have found especially inspiring is civic scientists' dedication and persistence even when the results aren't what they might hope they would be. Their plants don't make it through the winter, it's too cold, or it's too hot in the summer, or their seeds don't germinate. And people really care about the success of their plot and their plants, and they really want to get the data collection right. They want to do right by the plants, and they want to contribute to really good quality data and learning about what's going on. They're really curious and they're really dedicated. So I think the perenniality of these people who are really wanting to help advance a more sustainable agriculture that can be more resilient in the face of climate change, and their dedication to taking care of plants to contribute to that bigger long-term work, is really inspiring to me.
Yeah, yeah. As you mentioned, there's so much in there. I'm curious. I mean, are you collecting these insights? I'm assuming you have surveys of some kind, right? That are in the back end. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. So in addition to asking people to share the kind of scientific data, observations, photos, we have different surveys asking for their stories, their experiences, and their feedback. How can we improve this project? How could we design future projects? What are you learning? What are you wondering? What are you challenged about? And we also have forums where people share experiences. We have community calls where people come together, and we've done different kinds of site visits, actually going out to people's places and plots and having them give us a tour and talking about what they're learning and sharing. Seeing those stories, seeing the artwork that people have created that inspired by their plots, those are all ways that we get a sense, a kind of richer picture of what's happening.
Yeah. Now, for others who are looking to design kind of a similar program, that hearing you saying you learned so much here, is there any one advice that comes to mind in terms of designing a program like this that you guys have learned to say, if I could tell you this one thing, do X, don't do Y. Is this what you think?
Well, I definitely think having a kind of backward design mentality is really important. So, civic science, in the way that we practice this method, it's a really powerful tool, but we try to really think backward about beginning with those research questions. What scientifically are we really hoping to learn through this research? How can we make sure those scientific research questions are a good fit for the types of data that civic scientists can collect? And we want to make sure that civic scientists are really meaningfully contributing to scientific research. So it's really good to think upfront about the research questions, both scientifically and socially, and then design backward based upon that so that things can align and that you can really set good, accurate expectations. We've had a lot of experimentation and our projects have evolved and changed a lot. Really grateful for all the civic scientists who have helped us improve and change over time. And it's maybe unavoidable, but to the extent that you can really help people get a picture of what they're entering into so they can decide if it's a good fit for them, we found that to be useful.
Yeah, and as you mentioning this, I'm thinking, are they involved in those initial stages of setting the question? And my broader question here is really,
Mm.
where are the researchers in this loop? Right, we've talked a lot about the civic scientists.
Yeah.
Curious where the researchers come in. I'm assuming they're designing the questions, obviously, but are the civic scientists involved in that part? Do you wish more of them were involved, or just tell us a little bit where the researchers are in this cycle?
Yeah, the researchers have been especially engaged in the design process, setting the like identifying the questions, helping design the data sheets and the educational training materials and things like that. Our civic science projects so far have been more contributory. We design and then civic scientists contribute to them, and then we learn together. So collaborative in that sense. We haven't yet gotten a project going that is more co-created, where civic scientists bring us the questions. But maybe over time, through projects like this, we'll start to surface some of the questions that civic scientists have and be able to design projects that help investigate them.
Yeah, I'm curious, why is that? Is it an issue of capacity, or because I imagine you have 100, say 100 or so 20, right, civic scientists. Um, managing all of that can be easy and requires a lot of resources. So tell me, what are some limiting areas here, right, in terms of this growth that you're talking about?
Yeah, I think that certainly capacity on our end, the Perennial Atlas project, we have an amazing project manager who is really the point person for all the civic scientists. His name is Reese, and that has been, I think, a really valuable way to advance in the community work and have those connections formed. But it's also capacity for civic scientists. Their ability to have time to contribute. In the Perennial Atlas project, this is the first project where we've been able to provide small stipends to civic scientists. So we're really interested in learning about the whether that helps support participation over time. And then I think in terms of designing research projects and questions, because perennial grain crops are still being developed, the people, my colleagues, the scientists who have been working on breeding and studying these plants for decades, but who they are sort of the experts in identifying what we need to learn about them. And so that's been important for setting research questions. But as these crops move through development and become closer to becoming crops, I think that opens up lots more possibilities for people to bring their own questions and develop more projects based upon this.
Lots of room for growth there, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think
You
room
mentioned.
for growth in terms of a lot more diverse perspectives too. I think a limiting factor if you're doing perennial grain civic science is being in the same place for several years with access to a spot for a research plot, whether that's your home or a community garden or something. So I think that sort of the time involved and the place also might limit who can participate. So designing projects that support broader participation could be really important to get more perspectives.
On the research side of things, what have they been telling you about just getting involved in this, right? Because they have this now massive group of people that are collecting data, right? Otherwise, it will be really hard to collect. Just curious for the researchers that are listening to this and watching this later, can you share a little bit of what have been some of the surprising things you've heard from them, right? In participating in the work.
Well, one thing we've learned is just how much data can come in and being able to think about how to design so that we can support high quality data is always a question scientific researchers have. So being able to partner really closely on how we're asking for data, how we can sort of use different ways to quality control and curate that data, and how we might be able to ask for things in multiple forms and learn which are good fits for civic scientists and what they're interested in collecting. That sort of design aspect has been really exciting. But then also working with the volume of data that comes in and sorting through it and looking at it has been really interesting. One thing that I've heard that has been really exciting is about the high quality of photos that our civic scientists take when they see a potential disease or pest issue. Our scientific colleagues have been impressed by their ability to capture good photos and then to go out and when we look at those photos and say, oh, we're really interested in this, and then they can go and take a sample and send it to us. So I think that has been really great to see the interest and abilities that people are bringing to this project.
Because they have, I'm assuming there's some sort of app on their phones, right? That takes photos and all other details that they have, right? So it's a full suite of things that they have. And you're shipping them material as well. You mentioned at the beginning as well.
Yes.
So, I mean, as I mentioned, this takes resources. Who's funding this work?
So the Land Institute is mostly philanthropically funded. So we're really grateful for supporters who've been able to help us grow this work. And the particular Perennial Atlas project is also been grant funded. And so that's been really helpful in helping us have these resources and capacity to support this project where we can really help test how this method works in order to advance perennial grain crop domestication.
Yeah, and now you're providing these small stipends you mentioned earlier. This is the first cohort you'll be able to do this. Is that right?
Yeah. So we're quite interested to see how people respond to that, the sort of feedback that we're getting. We're still analyzing this first year's worth of data to see after the 2024 growing season, but it will be really, I think, valuable for us to test what civic scientists are looking for.
Yeah. Now, on your website, you mentioned partnership as something being very critical. Of course, you're partnering with civic scientists, but you also have partners who are funding this work. Can you just tell us more about that? In particular, where are some areas where you would love more partnerships, right, to grow this network of civic scientists that you do have?
Oh, it's a great question. So, yeah, in addition to civic scientists, we've been able to partner with the Sci group at Colorado State, who has a platform, and their expertise in citizen science and participatory research has been really valuable for us. And I also have learned a lot through engaging with the Association for Advancing Participatory Sciences. It used to be the Citizen Science Association. Their conferences, their resources, they have some really great trainings and materials, and that network and community has been valuable for us. In terms of growing civic science work, I think there are a lot of groups and community groups who have interest in gardening and local foods and foraging and sustainable agriculture, and the whole kind of civic agriculture effort. People who care about plants and who care about their places. And so I think there's a lot of room for us to grow more connections and hear from people who share similar interest in creating a more sustainable food future in their places.
Yeah, and it sounds like there are nonprofits I can imagine, right, that probably have access to communities that might be interested in this, right?
Yeah.
Do you partner with nonprofits right now? Do you have any existing partnerships with on the ground nonprofits?
Um, None are coming to mind. We certainly know people and communicate, but I don't know that we have a existing civic science partnership in that way.
I see, but again, that's another entry point, right? Plug into
Yeah,
it as this program
totally.
to grow. And
Also,
also,
probably schools and educational institutions.
right.
I have a variety of teachers, and some of our civic scientists are associated with nonprofits and come from that line of work. So I think even though we don't have a lot more formal institution to institution partnerships through these projects and through the people who are participating, there's definitely a network there.
Okay, so we're getting towards the end of the conversation. Sadly, and as we were talking offline, this is just an intro, and I'll tell all my guests we want to continue the conversation, right? Um, so we're gonna do a little bit of rapid speed Q&A.
Hey,
Aubrey, are you ready? Are you ready?
okay, I'm ready.
Um, so biggest challenge.
Time.
Expand a little bit. Time for what?
Oh, I think time to take the time to really observe and sink into all of the exciting things that are happening, but then also the movement of time across the seasons when you're working with plants, timing of different things, and a lot of different places and climates, getting everything to align timing wise, takes some effort.
Okay, good answer. If you were to get an unrestricted grant tomorrow, okay, where would you focus? Where would you focus your efforts first?
Hmm. I think I would be really excited to uh, be able to uplift and elevate more of the stories of the people that we work with to wider audiences. The kinds of relationships that people are forming with these plants, civic scientists, researchers, advocates, people across the Land Institute's work, being able to bring awareness to perennials is something I'm really passionate about.
Mhm. What would you like to learn in this upcoming year?
I am really excited to see the kind of retention that we have. So people have gone through the first year. I'm interested to see which plants come back, which people come back, and my colleague Reese will be making some visits and getting tours with people and hearing more about their relationship to place and whether that was a motivator for them or whether that's changed throughout their participation. I'm really curious about.
Yeah, and what is the hope for this program in the next five? Pick your time span. I don't know. Oh, well, what is the vision here?
I really hope that through the Perennial Atlas project, we can create really robust and exciting data sets that are valuable and useful for perennial grain scientists to use. And I hope that through this work, we can continue to grow the network of people who care for perennial grain crops, who participate in their research, who advocate for them, who tell that story, and who help realize this more sustainable agriculture. So both for the crop development and for the human cultural growth, I'm excited about that.
There's lots in there, of course. And I'd forgotten to ask you this earlier. I'd asked you kind of the breakdown of who participates in this. The age range. You mentioned educators are actually part of whom you would like to collaborate more also, right? Collaborators. Are young people part of this? I'm assuming they could be, right?
Yeah, we do have some civic scientists who do this as a family project. They're doing this with their kids who are participating, or a civic scientist who is a teacher who has a plot part of their school, or people who are older who might their grandkids might help, or their neighbor, the kids in the area might help, or things like that. So there's some intergenerational work going on, but I think there's an opportunity there still to grow. It is challenging with crops that are primarily growing in the summer, and we think about the way the U.S. school year is set up. That's not often the time for a lot of school projects, for people to be on site at schools. But I think there's some creative ways to think about supporting those connections.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of people hopefully watching and listening thinking, okay, what's my plug-in point, if you will, right? To collaborating with you all and the work you're doing. So we clearly need to have you back, Aubrey, to tell us those insights. And if people want to reach out to you, what do you recommend they say in the email?
I would love to hear, yeah, what about our work they're especially interested in, how it connects to the things that they're passionate about, or the topics that they want to investigate or explore. And as you mentioned, we do have an interest form on the Land Institute's website. You could email us at just CivicScience, all one word, at landinstitute.org, and we'll get you a link to the interest form and learn more about you.
All right, we'll leave it there. This has been fantastic. Thank you so much, Aubrey.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.